What's up, fam? Welcome to BBI Talks. I am your professor, Karriemah Lotus, and I'm telling you today, I'm even going to school because I got somebody who's like the professor of professors that's actually going to be on the show today, and I am like crazy excited to welcome him. I'm going to start with just a brief summary of who this brother is. Baba K. RASHID NURI had a powerful burning bush revelation while a student at Harvard. The experience set him on a global food odyssey, managing agricultural operations throughout the US and 35 countries in Europe, Asia, and Africa. RASHID saw up close the abuses and inefficiencies of big ag or big agriculture. His vision of community food sovereignty and food equity emerged with full clarity. He brought that vision to Atlanta in 2006, founding Truly Living Well for natural urban agriculture. TLW became Atlanta's premier urban agricultural organization, growing tons of chemical-free, nutritious food, providing jobs and educating communities about food nutrition and self-sufficiency. Y'all, I couldn't think of a better way for us to conclude our Green Goals series, where we are really talking about our connection to the land and the importance of us reestablishing a more positive connection to the land. Without further ado, we've got Baba K. RASHID NURI. Baba RASHID, how are you, brother?
Greetings, peace be unto you.
Oh, it is such an honor, a privilege, and a pleasure to have you. I'm doing fantastic. Matter of fact, I'm on top of the world because I got you on the show today. This is awesome. And I want to make sure that we know we are highlighting, I mean, it's a memoir, but you know what, Baba? The last time I saw you, when you came to Magnolia Crescent Orchards, my husband and I, our property, and you gave us this wonderful consult of how to really make the most of our land, and we appreciate you for that. We were reading this book right here. For those of you who can't see it, it is his memoir, but you know what else it is? It's the curriculum for a master's program. This is a master's degree.
Yeah, that's very generous of you, sister. I appreciate it.
This is a master's degree. It's entitled Growing Out Loud, Journey of a Food Revolutionary. Oh my gosh. At first, I didn't know where to start. I didn't know where to start.
Is always a good thing.
So I'm not going to talk anymore. I want to hear from you. Just in the beginning, okay, you go into your adolescence and your family and all of that. But there's a part that I would like to start at, and that is just when you entered into Harvard University. Okay. And this is what, the 1960s?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Middle of the 60s. Mm-hmm.
Middle of the 60s. What was that experience like for you? Being a Black man in America, entering into a predominantly white institution of Harvard University.
Yeah, you're not going to get much whiter than Harvard was, particularly at that time. You know, when I graduated, I had classmates in high school say to me, "RASHID, you don't deserve to go to Harvard. The only reason you're going is because you're Black." And I have to admit that affected me until, as I grew older, I realized that they were full of stuff, that I was eminently qualified to be there. And I was there because of my energy and intellect and all those things. So it was strange. I did not like Harvard. In fact, I only lived on campus less than one semester. There was too much that I was unfamiliar with, but I had a greater attraction to the streets of Boston, New York. So my first degree was really in the streets, listening to music. All the jazz clubs, I had a fake ID. And I guess the people figured if I worked as hard as I did to make that fake ID, that they need to let this young boy in here to hear this music. So I got to hear Monk and Mingus and Miles Davis, and then go through the go through the list, being able to sit right at their feet and hear that music. I also worked in all of the poverty programs. I helped start the Prosperity Businessmen's Association, so those small mom and pop grocers could buy together. Instead of buying a quarter case or half a case, they could buy a whole case and divide it up and save that money.
Awesome.
I mean, a lot of. I worked in all. I've worked with CORE, SNCC, Urban League, the Roxbury Dorchester Area Planning Action Council. That was Johnson's War on Poverty. The only one of them bourgeois organizations I didn't spend time with was the NAACP. And it was during that time, soon after that, the late 60s, that I joined the Nation of Islam. And because the Nation was a group that I knew of that was actually doing something. Everybody else was just talking. And the Muslims were doing something. And that's how that period went.
And just for clarity's sake, you know, you, from my understanding, were the original Minister of Agriculture under the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Is that correct?
Not quite. After he dropped, Elijah Muhammad dropped his body. His son called all the so-called educated Muslims to Chicago, and that was the most intelligent group of people that I've ever been associated with. It was really amazing because most people thought that Mr. Muhammad was saying, "Don't go to school." That's his story. Come to the temple and hear the truth, learn the truth. And that got interpreted many times in the street as putting down formal education. But in fact, that wasn't true. He was encouraging all those young people to go get as much knowledge as you can to bring that back to the community. So when I finished school, I went out to California. I was in San Diego. That's where I started my professional career. And when Minister Farrakhan came out there to give a talk at the San Diego State University, and he called me up on the stage to let folks know that I was coming to Chicago to work with the Nation. So we're under Waritha Dean.
Okay.
And I wrote a report, lengthy trip report, and then I was appointed as the general manager of Islam Agricultural Systems and moved south. All of this was in 1975.
Awesome. And how many acres of land did we have at that time?
13,000.
13,000 acres of land.
We had 3 farms. There was actually 4 farms. They had a small farm, 169 acres, I believe it is, was over in Michigan. I'm not sure it's the same place that Minister Farrakhan has a farm now, but it's up in that same neighborhood.
Gotcha.
Then in Alabama, we had 2 farms. In Marengo County, we had 5,000 acres. There was 4,000 acres in Greene County. And then in Turrell County here in Atlanta and Georgia, it was a 4,200 acre farm. First office we had was in Montgomery, Alabama, just down the street from the state capitol. But after being there for just a short while, I realized that the action of the farm gave me a chance to see what was going on and make some decisions. So I moved over to Georgia on the 4,200 acre farm, which is probably the most idyllic place I've ever lived in my life. We had the house sat on a little hill underneath some oak trees and surrounded by pecan trees. Across the street was the dairy. We had beef cows out in the pasture behind. There were sheep running around. We had horses, and the chicken farm was a separate unit, which was down the street. So it was. I was young and dumb and didn't know anything. But in the course of my life, I learned to swim in the deep end of the pool. Literally. And I don't swim well now, but that's where I learned. And so it was a tremendous learning opportunity for me, having been told to learn about agriculture. to come from San Diego working with that. My first professional job was much the same as what we did with Truly Living Well. That's where some of those ideas came from. But to be responsible for 13,000 acres of land, I must have been 27, 28 years old, was an absolutely amazing learning opportunity for me.
It sounds like it. I mean, that's an awesome opportunity for anyone, 27, 28, let alone 75, 80. 13,000 acres of land is, I mean, that's like the size of a country.
Yes, probably right.
Yeah. I want to pivot for a moment and read a little text from your book. And I'm going to kind of do this periodically because I really want people to understand just the phenomenal read that this is. So in the beginning of the book, the introduction, The Revolutionary's Backpack, it reads, "There's a food uprising happening in America. We live under a commercial food system that is broken and beyond repair. It demands replacement. Urban agriculture is a solution. A paradigm shift has already taken place. True revolution is evolving from the urban rebellions of the 1960s. Social and community structures that were destroyed in urban centers 50 years ago are being replaced with systems that address the essential needs of our people. Fundamentally, communities need control over their own food, clothing, shelter, and education. Catalyzing the new paradigm of community control is the new food movement." And I just wanted you to take a moment to kind of speak to what you were sharing in that introduction of your book.
Well, you're going to build a country. You have to, it's food, clothing, and shelter are the basic needs. And Black people, let me make this part very clear, because I'm not sure who your whole audience is. I'm not against white people, but I am very much for Black people. And yes, we have been wounded, oppressed for so many generations. We're sick people. We need to heal. And this is what I want my work to do, to be of service. The greatest sign of success is service. I got that phrase, "It is simply service that measures success," came from George Washington Carver. And it resonated with me because that's what I've tried to build, is a life of service, and primarily to the Black community. But I'm sure what I've learned is that the white people, everybody has been able to get something from what I do. But my focus is the Black community. We haven't had sovereignty. Unfortunately, I think that the civil rights movement did so much to destroy the Black community. We used to live next door to the doctor, lived next door to the janitor, next door to the accountant. We went to a Black grocery store, Black dry cleaners, Black pharmacy. And the civil rights movement disintegrated that and had to have us spread out. And contrast that with how our communities have been bombed and destroyed over the course of our tenure here in this country. In 1910, Black people owned 18 million acres of land in the United States. Today, we only have less than 2 million. All right. So, you know, everybody has now learned about Tulsa, how we had a thriving, wealthy Black community. It was literally bombed. And anytime folks stand up for rights, they get bombed out. Look what happened in Philadelphia. Black mayor dropped bombs on all them people up there. So these are the kind of wounds. These are the kinds of things that I find disconcerting. So my work, appreciating what you've asked me, my work has been to remedy some of these things. And God told me to learn everything about food from the seed to the table, to do it experientially. And over the course of these last 50 years, what I've come to understand and see is that small farms and urban agriculture can address every issue you have in the metropolitan area. And why the metropolitan areas? One, I am a city boy. You know, born in Boston, and I already talked about running the streets of Boston and New York, listening to music. I went to 14 schools before I graduated high school in San Diego. So And so coming back after spending all those years in the countryside, down in South Georgia and Alabama, all over Asia and Africa, when I came back to the United States, I knew that my work needs to be where the people are. And 82% of Americans live in metropolitan areas. Our food travels 1,500, 2,000 miles before it gets to our table. So we need to produce food where we are and establish food security, food self-sufficiency, and most importantly, food sovereignty. We need to be in charge of our food because it boils down very simple. Whoever controls your food controls you.
That's right.
This is how they get so many of them brothers, and they keep them under control in jail because they got their food. If you do right, you're not going to eat. All right. So these are the conditions that we have had to endure all these years. Has many manifestations and ramifications, but that's the input. That's what I. Whew, let me slow down.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. The foundation for my work is around those principles.
And now, when I was reading this book, it's almost like you took us on a journey of even your search, whether it be an introspection that took place or internal quest to determine what your purpose in life was going to be initially. And it's like you veered off away from Harvard for a minute to go into Harlem. And I'm reading about all, like you said, you're going to see the John Coltrane's and all that. And it must have been such a wonderful experience. And I was telling my husband, I said, it almost reminds me of how when I was younger, they used to say, oh, that person went to go find themselves, right?
Yeah.
So they would go off somewhere and have all of these world experiences, and that helped them to grow as a person. But then eventually you came back and you started inhaling these books, and you feature some of these books in this book that really helped to form and shape your ideologies. And you speak of the Honorable Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana as being one of those people who really helped to define how you looked at the world. Can you kind of share some of that with us as well?
Yes, I will. Oh, man. Let me just go take you back either a few sentences, a few paragraphs.
Okay.
The title of that book, Growing Out Loud, is an entendre, double entendre, because since I've been involved with agriculture, most people think the book is about how to grow tomatoes. And if that's what you want to know, my book is not the one. So I'm talking about how to build community, how to grow communities, how to build nations, and also how I have grown. You are absolutely correct. Growing Out Loud is about the landscape and the politics, but it's about me and myself growing out loud, sharing it. Because, one of the things I say to you young people is I will give you the time and the space to learn from your mistakes. That's your right. Okay. But if you listen to me, you can save some time. You don't have to. You got all things that you want to do, but I've been out there and I've shared the mistakes that I have made. I've shown you this, went around the barn to get to this, how I got to where I am, how I got the knowledge that I have and the experiences that I've gone through. So yes, Kwame Nkrumah is an absolute giant. He led the first nation that in sub-Saharan Africa to receive independence, self-dependence, was Ghana in 1957, and he led that. Nkrumah had a whole series of books. He's the one that helped me to understand what neocolonialism is and the definition of imperialism. He called for the United States of Africa. He said, Black people, you need to unite. So many of his ideals and ideas were seminal to the development of the entire continent. And he made some mistakes. And I learned from that. Agriculture in Ghana is still very, very important. They got the finest cacao or cocoa in the world. They've grown cotton, and I was involved in all that stuff. But what he did, he sold his cocoa beans to Europe.
Mm-hmm.
He borrowed money against the cocoa crop to put up the dams and infrastructure, to build the infrastructure.
Right.
He got this money from the Europeans, and when they got mad at him for talking too much about neocolonialism and imperialism, they lowered the prices. He borrowed money to build this country, and when they got mad at him, they lowered the price, stopped buying. So he got stuck with all these beans and birds on bankruptcy, and that's what provided the excuse for the coup, which removed him from power.
Right.
So the principal thing that I learned there is the importance of added value processing. Instead of sending cocoa beans to Europe and importing Belgian chocolates and Nestle's Quick and Mars candy bars and Hershey's chocolate bars, make that right there in Ghana. Okay, but that's the trick that the Europeans, the Western world, has us in. Walter Rodney wrote a book that's called "How Europe Underdeveloped Africa." I saw a TED Talk recently, excerpt from a TED Talk. This sister from Southern Africa, she's explained in 4 minutes how Africa has supported the development of the West. Okay?
Yes.
We provided all the resources that they needed to build this industrial industrial world. And first and foremost, what they got was free labor, because they captured us, enslaved us, and had to do the work. Land, labor, and capital are the principal three main things you had. That's the whole conversation, what those all represent. But if you stop and think, America is the richest nation in the entire history of the world. That's a huge statement, and kind of hard to wrap your mind about it when you think about all the empires that existed before the United States. This is the richest empire there has ever been. And we are part of it. And you know how they did it? They got free land because they killed the Indians, the Native Americans. Genocide was committed against them. They got free labor because they enslaved us, African peoples. Some of us were here before them, but there's all kind of nuances. So I'm just giving you the broad view to try to connect some of these dots. And here's the one that they get. A lot of the capital to build this country did come from Europe, but here's the real joke. The major portion of the national wealth of the United States back in the 1800s was black people. If I had you as my slave, I could go to the bank and borrow money against you. Okay?
That's right.
Can you do the work you can do, but you can make some babies that makes me even wealthier.
That's right.
That was the capital that was represented in this country. And we need to, if we had a better understanding of these things, we wouldn't put up with the stuff that we have put up with over the years. And that's why they wouldn't let us read. And even today, I just had this conversation a few minutes ago. One of the saddest truths in this country is if you want to hide something from a black person, where do you put it?
In a book.
Hello. Okay. We don't read. I mean, I rarely lock the door at my house. The only thing that would have any value on the streets in my house is this computer that we're talking on. Outside that, I got a house full of books. I got a house full of paintings, and that I've collected, artwork that I've used, a couple of pieces up on top of the bookcase. You can see that I collected as I traveled in the world. But I don't have to worry about that stuff being stolen. Nobody's gonna take that. All right. But the real true, you talked about in my book, I do list the people I read: Padmore, Francis, Malcolm X, of course, just
Basil Davidson.
Now that was a white man that gave me the tour of Africa. I got about 6 or 7 of his books, and I just read them just to learn about who I am and where I came from. That's the external version, but I also had learning who I was on the inside. Naeem Akbar.
Yeah.
His book that just blew me away was called The Community of Self. And here I'm running. Say it again.
I've never read that one.
Oh yeah.
And I've read most of his books, but I've never read that one.
That was one of his first ones, you know.
Okay.
And I'll be very honest, I didn't even really read the book. I just read the title, and it just connected dots for me, because I've been searching around trying to find community and be involved in the community. At one point, all I saw around me, a bunch of junkies. And I said, no, this ain't it.
Right.
And really started that internal search. And what he made clear to me, what I was looking for was the community of self. It was an external thing. It's an internal process that one has to go through, internal jihad, what we call it in Islam, to find out who you are, what you stand for, what you believe in. And that's what I've gotten in trouble over the last 4 years, because I think that's what the president has done to America. He's made people look at themselves. Ooh, are we going to go for this nonsense that this man's saying? People had to stand up, make choices, because you continue to sit down, do nothing, then nothing's going to change. So when I say that he is the best thing that's happened to this country in many, many years, it's not because I like him. I would have no interest in having lunch with this man at all, and definitely not going to vote. I don't like either one of the politicians, to tell you the truth. But what Donald Trump has done is make people stand up. And the best indication example I can give you that is what's happened during this confinement. You stop and think. There have been street rebellions to generations here in America. Harlem, Detroit, LA, several times. But when you look at those pictures, did you ever see white people out there?
Not until recently.
That's my point. That's exactly my point. Okay? Atlanta had more white people out them streets than black people. Atlanta's been known. Atlanta's the only major city in this country, one of the only major cities that never had a street rebellion. Okay? Think over that. This bastion of civil rights. Nobody ever got out into the streets until this year. You got more white people out in the streets than you do black people.
That's a phenomenal thing to highlight in this. I want to kind of rewind just a minute, because in an age where everybody is, a Facebook philosopher, and you get your YouTube clip, and that's supposed to replace reading books. I really want to take the time to highlight some of the books that you featured in your book, because these are book titles that we're not going to see, unfortunately. One thing about everything being digitized is that it also gives those who are digitizing the opportunity to edit out what they don't want us to read. I remember many years ago, I was looking for the book Murder by Injection, and I was about to pay $50-$60 for this book, Baba. And I ordered it, and then they canceled my order. It was supposed to come in from England.
Oh, get out of here.
And they said no longer in stock, and refunded my money and never sent my book. And I'm like, are they serious? So I just want to highlight some of these books, because they really are phenomenal. Nowadays, young people call them receipts. They're talking about books. So let's highlight some of the books that we need to all look out for. So one of your earlier books that you read was entitled Neocolonialism: The Last Stage of Imperialism. That was a book by the Honorable Kwame Nkrumah of 1965. He also has other books such as Ghana, The Autobiography of Kwame Nkrumah, Africa Must Unite, Axioms of Kwame Nkrumah, African Socialism Revisited and Dark Days in Ghana, Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, Conscientianism, I think I pronounced that wrong, Philosophy and Ideology for Decolonization, 1970, and then Class Struggle in Africa. And I think it's important for us to read these books, because a part of your evolutionary process involved you acquiring knowledge of self. And that's something I think is an important takeaway to highlight. You also talked about writings or speeches of Malcolm X, including the speeches of Malcolm X at Harvard. Malcolm X speaks selected speeches and statements by George, is it Brightman? Brightman, yeah. Brightman. By Any Means Necessary, speeches, interviews, and a letter by Malcolm X, also written by George Great Men, The Last Year of Malcolm X, and From the Dead Level, Malcolm X, Me, and that's by brother Hakeem A. Jamal.
Yeah.
You also I'm just last one. You also talk about W.E.B. Du Bois, The World in Africa. Yes, sir.
Oh, what I was going to say, you know, when people hear some of those titles, particularly the ones around Malcolm, there's been so much written about Malcolm every year, some more and more stuff. But if you consider that, those were the years right after Malcolm was assassinated. And so they didn't have all of the details that you get from a 50-year perspective and doing the research to find out more information. There's a lot of stuff that's out there that's still conflicting.
Mm-hmm.
But through that process, it gives me a better perspective because I was interested in the subject, it's given me a better perspective to judge and evaluate new information that comes, you know. Mm-hmm. But there are, you know, people like Frantz Fanon, who's a psychiatrist, broke down how sick we are as a people. Mm-hmm. Okay, you know how we have land, we have all the elements of building a nation, yet we still turn around and try to be white folks. Mm-hmm. That's sick, but you need to understand why that is. The man that's beating you and hurting you, raping your women, if you want to survive, sometimes you got to take on what they offering, or you'll be one of the devils. Then you have folks like Nat Turner to say, "Oh hell no,
right,
let's go down." And I'm somewhere in the middle. I've tried to build things that are constructive, and so that we can survive this. Because this you know, Quran say men plan, God plans. God is the best of planners.
That's right.
The experiences that we've had to go through as a people has prepared us for the future that we are now building. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the key.
So you said, God said, quote, learn everything you can about food from the seed to the table.
Yes, ma'am.
That was when, after you had that self-analysis, you've taken this knowledge, and then God spoke to you in your spirit.
Well, no, man. You know, see, that's deep. For many years, to put it in context, I was sitting in the library writing a paper on theory and practice, comparing the work of Jomo Kenyatta in Kenya,
yes,
and NURI'S in Tanzania. And Tom Mboya, who was a finance minister to Kenyatta, wrote in his book, it's also right over here, he said, with all the technology available in the world today, there's no reason we couldn't chemically synthesize enough food to feed everybody. I said, oh, whoa, that's all these chemicals that are making us sick and are killing us. And right then, God spoke to me. And that's where those words came. It's right in my ear. And for many years, I didn't fully understand what had happened. That I used to say, oh, like a suit of clothes came down out the sky and gave the direction. No, God spoke to me. And the woman, my wife, mother of most of my children, she read that chapter and she said she learned so much. I said, what do you mean you were there? You know, she says, no, I saw what happened after you came home. Okay? She didn't really know what the experience was, because that put me on a path that's been Siratal Mustaqim, a straight path, where we are today, to have this opportunity as a senior citizen and an elder to be able to sit down and talk to you and all the folk that are out there in your audience and share some of these experiences in a way. That book is a polemic. I'm going to give you my opinions, as you've just been hearing. I'm going to tell you what I think. I'm also going to teach about different aspects of agriculture. There are many people who have a greater depth of knowledge in any specific area of agriculture, but there are very few that have the breadth of experience. So at the very first, I know what questions to ask to be able to get into the depth and be able to get somebody else. And then finally, that's wrapped around an autobiographical theme, so you can see how I learned these things over the course of the last many years.
Now, I want to pivot into advocacy. because we can't talk about food security and food sovereignty if we're not talking about advocacy. And there was something that I wanted to highlight that you feature here in the book. A great question is, why does the Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, allow these chemicals to be ingested if they are so dangerous to humans and the planet? Great question. It really is quite simple. The chemical companies, particularly Monsanto and DuPont, own the FDA. You can buy a politician. With all due respect to my political colleagues, the American political system is for sale. He who gives big bucks gets what he wants. And you continue to share some people, some names that we're familiar with, like the Hillary Rodham Clintons of the world, who was the former U.S. Secretary of State that sat on Monsanto's board of directors, as well as having been a Monsanto attorney and lobbyist. And hired the Monsanto lobbyist, pardon me, Jerry Crawford. You highlight Donald Rumsfeld, the former U.S. Secretary of Defense, who was also on Monsanto board of directors. Clarence Thomas, the Supreme Court judge, was also a former corporate lawyer for Monsanto. And you just kind of go in from there with people that we're familiar with. How does that, when we're talking about food sovereignty, how do we fight that fight when those who we are taking this fight to are sitting in these positions of great influence in this country? What do you say to the person who wants to take that on?
No, that's a very fair question. And let me approach this way. I no longer stand on the corner waving signs protesting what they're doing. Rather, right. I prefer to take my energy and build what it is I want to see. Okay, so I think it's important to understand. They say keep your friends close and your enemies closer. You need to know who they are and what they're doing. But the work we have to do, and what I've been involved in, is helping to create and establish the local food economy. And we've done that. We used to call it a local food movement. It's no longer a movement. The paradigm has shifted. We see that the big food, big ag, capitalist ag don't work. It's broken. This is another one of the beautiful things that this pandemic and confinement has done, is heighten the contradictions that exist in the food system. If you remember in March on the news, they had pictures of those big ag farmers, all those chemical users, taking food out crushing that food in their fields and putting and burying it. Okay, people were lined up to get food at the grocery store, and they're out there destroying food. They're also lined up and having fights over toilet paper, but I had never understood that. And it made me just go on myself. And the small farmers and urban agriculturalists at the farmers markets that are around had long lines. They didn't have enough food. These small farmers and urban agriculturists have had the best year they've ever had, right? Because people be better appreciating having that food close to them. We used to live within walking distance of where our food was produced. Mankind did. You walk to where you food. We don't have that. That's why this system, that's part of the breakage, the problems with the system of agriculture is in place. It's based upon, it's a petroleum-based agricultural system. Just one example, the gunpowder, back at the end of the Second World War, the munitions war is always very beneficial. People make a lot of money. The only war this country's ever been in has been over in Afghanistan, where they didn't make any money and actually ended into a recession. This is under Bush Jr. Usually you make money. And so all those munitions manufacturers at the end of the Second War, they still wanted to keep making money. So you know what they did? They took that ammonium nitrate. Ammonium nitrate is gunpowder, okay? And took the gunpowder, continued making gunpowder, and gave it to the farmers to grow corn and wheat. Right?
Oh, wow.
So that's the fertilizer that they use out there. When that boy blew up the federal building in Oklahoma City back in '95, were you old enough to remember that? Yeah, that's what he used. Yeah. Ammonium nitrate was the fertilizer that he used, which was actually gunpowder to blow it up. So, you know, we eat the chemicals that we put on this food. I mean, there's so many different aspects of this conversation. We go talk about the hybridization, introduction to GMOs, how all the science. I got challenged just before I talked to you today by this woman. You got to follow what the scientists say. The scientists are killing us. Okay, so I don't pay any attention. If it doesn't make sense, if I can't see it emulated in nature, I don't want to have anything to do with it. Okay, and I think that's a important thing. I just lost my place.
The scientists are killing us, and in your book, you talk about how the scientists, especially when we're talking about our political leaders, they go by whatever is submitted. So they don't verify it. They don't send their own investigators out there to see if what these companies are saying is true is in fact true.
If you put a fox to guard the chicken coop, he's gonna let his brothers and sisters and his cousins in. His job is supposed to be to protect the chickens. Oh no, they're gonna open the gates and let you in. So this is where that FBA that you brought up comes in. If they're the ones who have to approve what goes in the food, and they all work for the companies that are producing the food, it's gonna pass. There's just no question about it. It's gonna pass. And that's the system that we live in. It's corrupt, okay? By most standards. And we have to build our own institutions, have our own food sovereignty, food self-sufficiency. All right? And that's the work that I'm moving towards.
Awesome. So that's moving this beyond the movement into something that's sustainable, something that we have autonomy over, is us being more responsible for developing our own systems in which we feed ourselves. Is that in essence what you're sharing?
Yes, but the construct of those systems has to be correct and in tune with nature. So I call it pre-industrial regenerative agriculture.
Okay.
I want to go backwards. Okay? All these so-called advances in making science, I don't want to go there. I want to go backwards. Here's another example. Do you have a loaf of bread? Excuse me, a loaf of bread in your house?
Yes.
How long has mankind been eating bread?
Have no clue.
Yeah.
Almost the beginning, I suppose.
Yeah. Thousands of years. Okay. How come in the last 10 or 15 years people can't eat bread? It has to be gluten-free.
Good question.
Yeah, because the seed that it came from, that we are growing food that is not metabolized, or human beings can't metabolize it. All right, it's making us sick. Okay? And this because this is what the scientists have done. The plant scientists have developed a species of plants. The wheat that we eat, it's not even GMO, it's just hybrid. That's bad enough. What the hybridization does makes everything exactly the same. Okay, so it's contrasted with natural wheat. Some will be tall, some will be small, shorter.
Right.
Not just one, so you can put a machine in there to harvest it. And those genetics, the food's coming out, we can't eat it. We can eat it, and that's why we're sick. You know, you got so many of us that are fat, all these diseases, diabetes, all this stuff comes from the food that we eat. Makes sense?
It makes perfect sense. And actually, I actually had an opportunity to work in Ghana, West Africa. I was a guest professor at a university there, but I also worked on poverty eradication initiatives. So some of the cocoa farmers that you were talking about and the exceptionally high illiteracy rates that were impacting them, because you're right, big companies like Mars, these multinational companies had basically monopolized their industry. So there are very few companies in that country that are able to produce value added products that can be exported out of Ghana, in comparison to the amount of raw cocoa beans that are actually exported and imported back into the country. And one of the things that was kind of setting fire internationally was the idea that these companies, like a Monsanto, was actually getting the seeds from these different indigenous communities throughout Africa and South America and patenting them, and therefore claiming ownership to the point where at some point they're going to be selling the usage of those seeds back to us. So this fight is not just a fight here in America, but this is a global fight when we're talking about food security. And I just wanted to ask you what your thoughts were on this global scale view of what's happening with our food security.
Yeah, you know, there's an old saying, think global, but act local. And I think that I know that my thought processes is at the global level, and then try to bring some of these things home. The Gates Foundation has, Bill Gates has a project up in Norway. They got underground caverns. And, you know, Norway stays cold. So underground there, it's like refrigerators that they're able to collect. They have attempting, and they're still working on gathering all food plasma in the world, the genetics on every crop that there is on the planet. They're putting down, they say in case there's a disaster, they can get it started. But no, I think it's much more sinister than that. They're collecting all that seed so they can control it. And that's the problem with hybrid. That's the other side of the problem with hybrid seeds, is that you have to go back to the same company to buy it. We used to, in many communities, people tithe. They save 1/10 of what they do. So you grow 10 ears of corn, you put 1 ear away for seed for the next year and consume those other 9. So tithing comes out of the earth. Okay? That's a natural process, saving your stuff. But if you're using hybrid seed, you cannot, if you replant it, you'll get something, but it's not going to be the same thing that you planted that first year. You'll revert back 2 or 3 generations. And that's how long it takes to get whatever the product is that they're selling to you. And you got to go get back in line, buy their seed, buy the chemicals that are going to make those seeds produce. And that's how they get us tied into this system. And places like India, I think India has more farmers committing suicide than any other place in the world, because it's a debtless society. People don't borrow money over there. Those farmers grew their own crops. They saved the seed, planted again. And the Westerners got them to start using fertilizers, which means they have to irrigate a lot of the stuff that they never had to do before, and end up owing more money at the end of the year than done. Because every year you come back, it takes more and more inputs. You start feeding that ground with chemicals instead of compost, it takes more and more. You're killing all the life in the soil, which is what produces the soil health, the soil vitality. So my teachings have always been compost, compost, compost. I mean, nobody was using compost when I came to this town. Now everybody, that's the first thing that comes out their mouth, and I say, yay, yay, yay. And it's amazing how much you can get done if you're not concerned with who gets the credit. So I'm not looking for any of those accolades. I'm just very happy to see all these people who are reflecting back the teachings that I've been putting out there. And that, to me, that's great. That's great. I don't need to say, oh, hey, look at me. That was my idea. I taught you. No, because number 2, there's nothing new in the universe. There ain't no new knowledge out there. It's just what knowledge has been passed on. That's why the griots in our community are so important. The history keepers, so they can tell those stories and repeat this. But we got to a place in agricultural history that they shut it down. Okay, and just shifted the paradigm to this chemical-based industrial agriculture, capitalist-driven agriculture. The reason that George Washington Carver, one of the reasons that George Washington Carver is important, is that he changed the whole basis of Southern agriculture. He didn't just work for Black people; he changed it for the whole South. Because cotton today is okay, and they had grown cotton in the same fields over and over and over and over again until the soils were completely depleted. And Carver showed them how to compost. He created crop rotations so they're growing. And that's the importance of the peanut. It puts nitrogen back in the soil. But peanuts, soybeans, sweet potatoes, these are all crops that he put into the rotation to help to rebuild the soil. The reason the boll weevil was so prevalent is because they were monocropping. If the soil is not healthy, the plants are not going to be healthy. And the insects are going to go to the sick. That's how they keep it clean. You go out into Africa in the savannas out there, you know, we have a tremendous relationship between those animals. How the herds of zebra, or gazelles are kept strong is because the old and the weak, the sick, are culled out by the lions and the leopards and jaguars. They keep that. That's how the herd stays strong. And it's the same thing in the garden. Any place you're gonna lose 10% of what you put out there. But if you don't, you know, the clearest indication of the quality of your soil are the number of earthworms that you find. How many roly-polies and centipedes and millipedes and all the microorganisms that exist in that soil. And if you've been putting chemicals on them, you're killing them. So therefore, you got to use all those pesticides to keep those plants clean so you can take them to market, whether it's a commodity crop like cotton or a vegetable crop. You know, it's a combination of all those chemicals are creating food that's, I call it Frankenfood. It ain't real. Any of y'all, and I do urge everybody to grow something, but if you ever when you grow a tomato, every tomato on that vine doesn't look the same. Right. They have different pieces, but you go to the grocery store, everything you see in there looks exactly the same. Exactly the same. Because they bred it to do that for the consumer. Right? So, and cut out the small farmers and urban agricultures and make us all go to the grocery store to buy that garbage that they're selling. It's ridiculous.
It is very ridiculous. And actually, I often ask the question, if it's even us that's really fueling this, why is it that we have this desire to see everything look the same? You know, what has happened in our conditioning that we have this push or that all of our vegetables have to look a certain way? Is it, well, in that training, does that include us being so far removed from nature?
Oh, yes.
Is that part of it?
Absolutely. Now, for someone to start telling me about food and its production after I've spent all these years doing, you know, it's I can't hear it, or I do hear it and just go past it. But we've been conditioned. I mean, just think about it. Any grocery store you go into, most of them, they're all organized the same way. You know, you'll find, I mean, one shelf may be shifted over to another one, but they got the same things on the shelf, every single store, and every one of them tomatoes in there looks exactly the same. I watched a video a few weeks ago about the avocado business. Avocados are, I remember I didn't like them when I was young. I love them now. I'm in San Diego. And now most of the avocados are produced in Mexico. And they got a whole mafia that's around control, making people pay protection for their avocado crop. I mean, there's a mafia that's been built around the avocados, and they're being grown a lot of chemicals. They're not as good as they used to be. They got more watery. Not as much oil coming out of it. And that's the commodification of America, commodification of the food instead of it being natural. And I wrote on my blog. I got a blog page on my website, and I put up every few weeks, a short piece. But when the folks calling me at the beginning of this pandemic and confinement asked me what I'm doing about food, I said, well, the best place for you to get your food. I had one sister tell me she's not really worried about it because she can just go out in her yard and pick some greens. That's the very best thing. Then the next thing is to go to a farmer's market, because that's usually farmers markets are fairly close. You can see who grows your food, quality of food, where your food comes from. That's called horticultural literacy. And if you are going to go to the grocery store, make sure you buy around the perimeter of the store. And whether you're vegan or carnivore, that's where your freshest food is going to be, is in vegetable department, the meat, seafood, dairy, bakery. That's the best place to get it. That stuff in the middle aisles is processed foods. And too many of us buy those foods and don't read the label. If it has more than ingredients, it's not food. Period. If you can't, you go over to the tomato department. Don't nobody have to put a label on it and say this is a tomato. You know what it is. All right, but the cans, they put all the ingredients in there. If it's got more than 5 ingredients, it's not food. It's a concoction. You can't pronounce what's in it. Read the label. If you don't know what that is, don't eat it. If you can't pronounce it, definitely don't eat it. It's not real food. So there's been a greater interest generated in local food, since the pandemic. All spring, some of their long lines at the outdoor store where the plants and the soil and stuff. I mean, particularly early in March and April, and there was them lines so long that people began to see the contradiction. Whoa, I can't get food. Let me grow my own. All right, we should have been doing it in the first place.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just want to take a quick break because we're about to wind down. This has been, wow, just awesome. Just awesome.
You got me all wound up too, huh?
Man, I thank you, Baba. This has really been phenomenal. Those of you who are on Instagram, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure that you also watch this on replay and take notes, because Baba Rashid was dropping jewels, y'all. And this is stuff that you want to be able to study, as well as cop the book, man. Like, don't cheat yourself. Get his book. You can get his book at the NURI'S.com. You can purchase it there. He'll even autograph it for you. Look, where's my autograph? I felt so special. I got my book, this autographed, to have my name and everything. But you even want to also gift this to your family and your friends, because the things that he shares in here is just really something that should be a part of, like you said, our history, really a part of our history. And of course, we know that the righteous plan history in advance. So we're not talking about stuff that's not relevant. We're talking about stuff that we can use in the present, moving forward into our future and creating a more beneficial future for us by having control over how our food sovereignty. And for those of you who are on Facebook and who are on YouTube, we thank you very much for joining us. This is the last part of the Green Gold series. You can reach Brother Rashid Nuri at the NURI'S.com. Get all of his books. You can sign on, which I strongly encourage you to sign on for his newsletters, because I read them as well. They're very thought-provoking, very timely. I mean, he even has articles on there about his take on Black Lives Matter and some of the other, pressing topics that are going on in the news. And he just gives his perspective and ties it into food security. So it's really great stuff. We're always looking for places that can really feed us and feed us well with things that can benefit us. This is a great resource that we have among us. And I'm showering you, Baba, with compliments and accolades, because I truly want to make sure you get your flowers while you live. It is all too often that we have greats such as yourself among us, and we don't give you the honor that is deserving of you. Because the contributions you've made, the sacrifices that you've made, we even get into the surgeries and trauma and just the different things that you battled. I mean, you touched on the experimentation of our people in this medical industry. I mean, you name it, it's in this book. And this is a part of your life journey, and you're just getting started. What are you, 75 now? This is just the beginning. They say you don't even learn how to live until you hit 60. So this is phenomenal. I'm looking forward to more works.
Well, thank you very much.
Awesome. Did you have any closing words for us?
Yeah, thank you very much for providing this creating this opportunity that we could share like this. And it's simply service that measures success. That's a quote from George Washington Carver. So if there's anything I can do to help, I've tried to make my life one of service. You can call me. She gave you my website, the Nuri Group. That's my email, Rashid at the NURI'S.com. And my phone number is 404-520-8331. 404-520-8331. Just call me. I'll do whatever I can to help you.
And he will come, and he has a master class that's online that he offers. He has consults where not only will he come over to individuals who have properties, but also organizations, institutions that are looking to maximize this land. You know, we've got these schools on school buildings. Yeah, there's nobody there going to school, but who's to say that that property can't be converted to grow food to feed the community? It can happen. There are schools in Oregon, if I'm not mistaken, that have school to table programs. Is that correct, Baba?
Oh yeah, you got them all over the state. No, it's not can happen. It is happening. What we need to do is accelerate the process, and so we're getting closer to food sovereignty, food self-sufficiency as soon as we can.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, like I said, you can check this entire podcast out, as well as the previous other 3 parts of the Green Gold series on Spotify at BBI Talks. Please share with your family and friends. Thank you for joining me and joining us here at BBI Talks on Instagram. Thank you, Facebook and YouTube, for all of you joining us as well. Baba, Rashid, Nuri, what can I say? I appreciate you. I honor you. I thank you for being on the show. And that's it. This is BBI Talks, y'all. We'll see y'all next week. Peace.